Imagine waking up every single morning with a heavy, suffocating knot in your chest, convinced that today is the day the entire world finally realizes you are a complete fraud. Everyone around you sees a highly capable, intelligent professional, a person who delivers results, commands respect, and earns every single accolade thrown their way. Yet behind closed doors, your mind whispers a terrifying script. It tells you that every win was a fluke, every promotion was an accident, every compliment was just a product of people being polite, or worse, completely deceived by you. You live in constant terror that the velvet curtain will be pulled back, exposing your true, inadequate self to the world. But here is the massive cognitive twist that will shatter your perspective. This paralyzing dread is not a sign of your weakness, nor is it evidence of your incompetence. In the realm of psychology, this agonizing self-doubt is actually one of the most reliable indicators that you possess a deeply analytical, highly evolved, and brilliant mind. Welcome to the dark side of competence. Section 1. The modern illusion of success and the anatomy of the silent imposter. In our modern, ultra-competitive world, we are constantly trained to build an immaculate external fortress of achievements. We stack our resumes with prestigious degrees, accumulate impressive job titles, collect digital validation on corporate networks, and present a polished, unflappable version of ourselves to society. We are told that achieving these milestones will naturally produce an unshakable sense of internal peace, confidence, and self-worth. Yet for a massive percentage of high achievers, the exact opposite occurs. The higher you climb on the ladder of objective success, the louder the internal voice of the imposter becomes. This psychological phenomenon is not a temporary bout of low self-esteem. It is a structured, repetitive, and deeply destructive internal cycle. When an individual experiencing this syndrome accomplishes something extraordinary, they do not celebrate. Instead, they experience a brief flash of relief, immediately followed by an intense wave of existential dread. They look at their hard-earned trophies and project an explanation that completely strips away their own agency. They tell themselves that the interview panel was having an unusually good day, that the exam questions just happened to cover the only 2 topics they memorized, or that they simply possess the charismatic luck to deceive highly trained professionals. This creates a terrifying psychological loop. Because you believe your success was a product of luck or deception, you feel an immense pressure to work even harder to maintain the illusion. You log longer hours, obsess over flawless execution, and sacrifice your personal life, all to prevent the imagined exposure. But when this extreme over-preparation inevitably leads to another massive success, the brain refuses to internalize it. The mind simply declares that the trick worked again, raising the stakes even higher for the next project. The long-term consequence of this structural cycle is profound exhaustion and chronic burnout. Over time, high achievers begin to associate success not with joy but with an ever-increasing burden of terror. They begin to reject promotions, avoid creative risks, and actively downsize their own ambitions simply to escape the agonizing spotlight that they believe will eventually expose them as an uneducated charlatan. Section 2. The Dunning-Kruger Paradox. Why intelligence breeds intense self-doubt. To truly understand why the brain constructs this elaborate trap, we must examine one of the most profound cognitive paradoxes ever discovered in modern behavioral science, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. In the late 1990s, social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger conducted a series of landmark studies exploring the relationship between actual competence and self-assessment. Their findings revealed a shocking inverted reality of human consciousness. The original study demonstrated that individuals with exceptionally low levels of skill or knowledge in a given domain suffer from a dual burden. Not only do they reach incorrect conclusions and make disastrous choices, but their incompetence completely strips them of the cognitive ability to recognize their own errors. They sit comfortably at the peak of what psychologists call Mount Stupid, possessing absolute unshakable confidence because they do not know what they do not know. However, the truly fascinating and tragic part of the Dunning-Kruger curve occurs when an individual transitions from a novice to a true expert. As your competence grows, your horizon expands. You begin to realize the immense scale, depth, and complexity of your field. Suddenly, you look at the vast ocean of human knowledge and realize just how small your current understanding truly is. Your circle of awareness expands, but as it does, the perimeter of that circle, which touches the terrifying unknown, grows significantly larger. Because you are highly intelligent, you can easily conceptualize what absolute mastery looks like. You can see the flawless standards of perfection, and when you look back at your own work, you see every minor flaw, every compromise, and every gap in your expertise. This leads to a massive cognitive distortion. High-achieving individuals assume that because a concept or a task feels relatively easy or logical to them, it must be equally easy and logical for everyone else. They dismiss their own unique skills as basic common sense. They think, if I can do this, anyone can, so why am I being paid, praised, or promoted for it? The historical record is filled with brilliant minds who were utterly crushed by this exact cognitive mechanism. Consider Charles Darwin, the revolutionary naturalist who completely transformed our understanding of biological life on Earth. Despite decades of meticulous research, empirical data collection, and global academic acclaim, Darwin's private journals revealed an individual plagued by severe self-doubt. He routinely described his own life's work as a wild speculation and constantly feared that his theories were nothing more than the naive delusions of an amateur. When you struggle with the imposter phenomenon, you are not suffering from a lack of capability. You are experiencing the direct, unfiltered side effect of advanced cognitive capacity. Your brain is intelligent enough to see the infinite complexity of the universe, and it is simply using that high awareness to unfairly criticize its own magnificent achievements. Section 3. The destruction of social mirrors and the toxicity of the digital highlight reel. The internal torment of the imposter does not exist in a psychological vacuum. It is aggressively fueled, amplified, and accelerated by a profound systemic flaw in how modern humans perceive the lives of others: the systematic destruction of accurate social mirrors. In our current digital age, this phenomenon has evolved from a subtle social bias into a full-scale psychological epidemic. To understand why this happens, we must look at a fundamental concept in behavioral psychology known as attribution distortion paired with the backstage-frontstage dichotomy. Human beings experience their own lives entirely from the backstage. You are acutely aware of your messy, unedited reality. You feel your morning grogginess. You remember the frantic panic before an incomplete deadline. You hear the petty, chaotic thoughts running through your mind, and you live with the intimate knowledge of every mistake you have ever made. Your internal experience is a chaotic documentary of struggle, doubt, and raw human vulnerability. However, when you look at the people around you, you are strictly granted access to their front stage. You only see the curated, edited, and perfectly lit cinematic trailer of their existence. On social media and professional networks, this distortion is weaponized. You see the polished promotional announcements, the flawless corporate presentations, the vacation photos, and the triumphant declarations of success. The cognitive trap snaps shut when your brain instinctively performs a fundamentally flawed mathematical equation. You compare your messy, raw backstage reality with everyone else's polished, hyper-edited front-stage highlights. This is a profound cognitive error. You look at a colleague who seems completely composed and articulate during a board meeting, and you assume their internal mind is just as serene, organized, and confident as their external performance. You think, they belong here, they know exactly what they are doing. Meanwhile, I am struggling just to keep my head above water. The ultimate case study of this psychological trap can be observed in the phenomenon known as the Silicon Valley imposter paradox. Silicon Valley is home to some of the most brilliant tech innovators, engineers, and entrepreneurs on the planet. Yet, clinical surveys conducted within these tech hubs reveal that upwards of 70% of these elite performers suffer from severe, paralyzing imposter syndrome. In these hyper-competitive environments, an unspoken cultural rule of toxic positivity emerges. Everyone is pressured to look like they are crushing it 24 hours a day. Because everyone is hiding their doubts behind a mask of supreme confidence, an individual looking out at the crowd genuinely believes that they are the only person who is confused, exhausted, or terrified of failure. The irony is staggering. A room filled with 100 brilliant professionals can feature 100 individuals who all secretly believe they are the only fraud in the room, completely unaware that the person sitting right next to them is drowning in the exact same ocean of self-doubt. By isolating your internal chaos and comparing it to an artificial external ideal, you grant the imposter voice ultimate authority. You convince yourself that confidence is a trait that everyone else inherently possesses, rather than a fragile mask that everyone else is actively fighting to maintain. Section 4. The anatomy of actionable deconstruction. Weaponizing objective data against subjective fear. If the imposter thrives on isolation, vagueness, and unverified emotional terror, then the only way to dismantle its power is through the cold, systematic application of objective reality. Emotional states are highly erratic and incredibly gifted at fabricating coherent narratives out of thin air. When you feel a sudden spike of anxiety, your brain immediately searches for a logical reason to justify that anxiety, settling on the comforting lie that you must be incompetent. To break this destructive cognitive loop, we must deploy the first and most critical scientific strategy: the objectification of achievement. In clinical cognitive behavioral therapy, this is known as cognitive restructuring through empirical auditing. The voice in your head screams a vague, sweeping generalization. You don't belong in this room, you just got lucky. If you try to fight this voice with positive thinking or generic affirmations, you will lose. The imposter mind is too intelligent to be fooled by cheap motivational phrases. Instead, you must treat the imposter voice as an opposing lawyer in a court of law and demand cold, hard, verifiable physical evidence. This is where the tactical creation of an empirical competence ledger becomes life-saving. The brain possesses a powerful evolutionary survival mechanism known as negativity bias. This bias ensures that your mind will instantly forget 20 glowing performance reviews and instead obsess over a single vague piece of constructive criticism for 6 months. An empirical competence ledger actively rewires this bias by forcing the conscious mind to log and categorize objective reality. This ledger is not a casual diary. It is a structured, data-driven archive of facts divided into 3 strict columns: the accolade, milestone, verifiable. Successfully delivered the Q3 financial forecast presentation, the metric of impact, the undeniable data or feedback that resulted, e.g., project approved without revisions, client sent an email stating the data architecture reduced their processing time by Merbone the agency factor, an explicit breakdown of the specific skills, late nights, and intellectual decisions you made to cause that outcome, completely forbidding the use of the word luck. To understand the immense power of tracking objective data over subjective emotion, we can examine the historic trajectory of Dr. Maya Angelou. one of the most celebrated, decorated, and profoundly influential authors and poets in human history. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, won multiple Grammys, and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Yet she famously uttered a line that perfectly encapsulates the agony of the high-achieving mind. "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody." How did an intellectual giant like Angelou keep creating masterpiece after masterpiece despite this recurring internal paralysis? She did it by constantly returning to the raw physical work. She detached herself from the fluctuating emotions of fame and praise, and instead anchored her mind in the objective reality of the blank page, her disciplined daily writing routine, and the tangible cultural impact of her words. She recognized that the feeling of being a fraud was an inevitable mental ghost that accompanied the creative process. But a ghost has no mass, no data, and no power when confronted with a lifetime of undeniable concrete work. When you force your brain to look at a physical, documented ledger of your impact, you create a massive cognitive dissonance for the imposter. The voice can no longer say you are incompetent, because the physical paper in front of your eyes proves mathematically and factually that you have delivered consistent high-value results through your own deliberate actions. Section 5. Dismantling the perfectionist trap and the liberation of shared vulnerability. To completely eradicate the root system of the imposter phenomenon, we must expose its primary chemical fuel, maladaptive perfectionism. High achievers routinely trap themselves in an impossible psychological paradox. They establish an idealized, flawless standard of performance that no human being could ever sustain, and then they use their inevitable failure to reach that impossible standard as definitive, catastrophic proof that they are an absolute fraud. In behavioral psychology, this is recognized as an extreme form of all-or-nothing thinking. If a project is 99% flawless but contains a single minor, inconsequential error, the perfectionist mind completely invalidates the entire achievement. It completely blinds you to your own progress. To sever this connection, you must deliberately transition from a mindset of perfection to a mindset of optimal sufficiency, driven by the core principle. Done is better than perfect. This is not an endorsement of sloppy, low-effort work. Rather, it is a sophisticated operational strategy that recognizes perfectionism for what it truly is, a manifestation of intense fear disguised as a virtue. Perfectionism is a defensive shield we hold up, believing that if we can just walk perfectly, talk perfectly, and deliver perfectly, we can completely protect ourselves from the pain of criticism, judgment, and exposure. But this shield is too heavy to carry. It paralyzes execution. The moment you accept that the human condition is inherently iterative, flawed, and constantly evolving, you strip the imposter of its absolute metric. You no longer need to know everything to be considered competent. You merely need to be willing to learn what you do not know. Furthermore, the final and most immediate method to dissolve this mental prison is the radical weaponization of mutual vulnerability. The imposter syndrome thrives in a state of absolute psychological isolation. It constructs a silent, invisible wall around you, whispering that you are the only weak link in an otherwise flawless ecosystem. It convinces you that if you ever reveal your doubts, you will be instantly cast out and humiliated. But when you choose to intentionally shatter this silence, you trigger a massive cultural phenomenon known in sociology as the beautiful mess effect. This psychological principle demonstrates that while we view our own vulnerability as a catastrophic sign of weakness, we look at other people's vulnerability as a deeply moving, highly courageous sign of authenticity and strength. When you look at a trusted peer, a mentor, or a member of your team and candidly utter the words, "I am leading this project, but I am facing moments where I feel completely out of my depth and worry I am letting everyone down," something extraordinary happens. The mask falls off the other person. They do not judge you. Instead, their eyes light up with immense relief as they confess, "Thank God you said that, because I have been feeling the exact same way for the last 6 months." By speaking the unsaid, you take away the monster's air supply. You realize that the terrifying shadow in the room isn't an individual flaw inside of you. It is a collective human condition that almost everyone is actively fighting to hide. So let us draw the final line in the sand today. The next time that familiar, icy voice whispers in your ear that you are a fraud who has simply fooled everyone around you, do not run from it. Do not try to drown it out with superficial toxic positivity. Instead, stand firm in your awareness, look directly at that shadow and smile. Recognize that this agonizing doubt is the definitive tax that your brilliant, analytical mind pays for its capacity to see the vast complexity of the world. It is not proof of your failure. It is the ultimate stamp of your deep competence. Your actionable challenge right now is simple, concrete, and immediate. The moment this video ends, open the Notes app on your device. Write down 3 hard, undeniable, data-driven wins you achieved over the past month and explicitly list the exact skills you used to make them happen. Force your brain to look at the cold, physical evidence of your value. And right now, let us collectively smash the isolation chamber. Go down to the comments below and type out one specific phrase or thought that your internal imposter routinely uses to sabotage your confidence. Let us lay those shadows out in the open light, look at each other's cards, and realize once and for all that we are fighting the exact same ghost. Subscribe to Shadow Psychology D. Share this with a brilliant friend who is currently drowning in their own self-doubt. And remember, you belong in every single room you walk into.